So what is it that defines who we are? I think identity is one of those things that essentially everybody grapples with. For example, in students who are trying to figure out what it is that they want to do next after they graduate. You see it with professionals who are after that promotion and think that once they secure it, that they'll actually be realized as individuals. Have I grappled with issues of identity? I have. I've grappled with the whole identity thing. There's actually a story that I want to share with you that pretty much illustrates my experience with this issue. I gotta admit that I'll feel a little exposed if I share it the way that it is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to hide behind the story and I'll share it with you in the third person. All right? All right, here goes. Once upon a time, there was a boy in search of his identity. He had searched far and wide and high and low, and still he couldn't find it. One day he thought, since I have not found my identity in love or family or country or land, then surely I shall find my identity in career. And so he set forth on this new quest to find his identity in career. First, he traveled to a foreign land. It was one with big, imposing buildings and concrete architecture, and he said, "A writer I have been, for the grammar lies in me. In this majestic city, yes, a journalist I shall be." He subsequently enrolled in school and secured enviable internships with some of the world's most reputable magazines. And on he went, networking and solidifying those relationships that would ultimately pave the way to him finding his cherished identity. Upon graduation, he landed a respectable job and promotion after promotion until finally he was made editor. But no. Still, he didn't know who he was, and he continued to move from job to job and land to land in this inexhaustible quest for his identity. But it was nowhere to be found. Well then, he reasoned, perhaps in this great journey I have missed a crucial factor. My true and complete self will flourish when I am an actor. Of course, he thought. How did I not think of this before? In theatrics I shall be, oh yes, I feel it in my core. And on he happily went, knowing that finally he had found his identity. He enrolled in acting classes with world-renowned thespian instructors. He made his foray in film, theater, and television, and found his niche in commercial work. After print and national campaigns, he set his sights towards that desert land with bright lights and cascading cliffs. Over the course of years, however, he realized that while certainly he was getting close, he had not really found his identity. It became clear to him that in fact it would not be in his hands until he actually reached the finish line. But in this desert land, the powerful people revealed to him that in order for him to reach the finish line, he must first take on their identity. But he didn't want their identity. And it came to pass that after all, for him, the finish line wasn't worth what it cost. What to do? Well, he drove out to the ocean and glared painstakingly at the horizon. And he cried, what's my purpose? What's my goal? In this world I have no role. He had gone to the ends of the earth, it seemed, looking for his identity and was still empty-handed. But with all of the energy he could muster, he pulled himself up and continued on his quest. And he said, I have traveled through the world and I've seen riches, wealth, and bounty. My talent I shall use, yes, for my nation, for my country. And not with the luster of days past, he emerged anew in a land of intellectuals. He would study internationalizationism. But, he thought, what if, after I get my degree, I'm still not the person I was born to be? He was a bit older now and realized that wisdom was required in making decisions. But how could I get wisdom? He whispered to himself. And in the olden archives of his early adult mind, he saw his grandmother, when he was only a child, reading from a book when she said, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." Having tried it all, he reached to his bookshelf for that dusty Bible, and turning the pages, his eyes fell upon a verse that just struck him. It read, Do not be conformed by the ways and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know his will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. At that moment, he was presented with a new paradigm that challenged his entire approach. Your focus is in the wrong place, it said. The old man first must be replaced. You must let go and live by faith if you so wish to run this race. Well, he decided to take on the challenge and said, I've tried it all, yet my predicament remains, and I don't know what this experiment contains, but for 1 year, I'll put this promise to the test, and through this time, I'll give my all and I'll do my best. And I can only trust that God will do the rest. And so began his experiment. Not knowing what to do, he started simply by praying to God. He prayed in the mornings when he woke up, on his way to class, sometimes even while conducting his research, and always, of course, when he was anxious or worried or sad. But while he prayed continually, it didn't seem as though anything was happening. And so he began to read the Bible as well. He read a little in the morning and a little more at night. Still nothing. There were a few verses, however, that really resonated with his experience, and so he began to read only these. He read them over and over until naturally they were committed to memory, and when he was faced with a particular concern, for example, he would repeat these verses in his mind and meditate on them. But while he found comfort in doing so, he didn't see any transformation taking place and began to feel as though he needed benchmarks to track his progress, but didn't know what exactly these would be. And he went and sought out a couple of Christian friends to whom he could address some of these questions, and he proceeded to study the Bible with regularity. And the more he read, he found that the more questions he had. And in this way, he eventually became consumed by the study of God's Word. There was one verse in particular that he had memorized, which he started to put into practice. And it read, "Trust in the Lord with all of your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take." He began to notice that in many of these verses, the prerequisite to securing a desired outcome always revolved around this trusting relationship with the Lord. But the more he focused on that relationship, the less he thought of the desired outcome. The more he thought about the Lord and learned of the Lord, the less he began to care about societal expectations, power, position, or even prestige. And that unquenchable thirst he had for worldly affirmation, which was actually at the root of his search for that ever-elusive identity, was being satisfied through godly affirmation. 3 years later, he no longer worries for what lies before him. In the interim, he had seen that God's will for him was indeed good and pleasing and perfect. The 1-year deadline for the experiment went by unnoticed to become the experience of a lifetime. In reflecting on the previous 3 years, he sums up what he has learned in this way. When I read through the epistles of the Apostle Paul, it became clear that this was a man with a mighty call. And as he scribed divine light across so many pages, the Lord foreknew that this would spread his message through the many ages. But then I wondered how he could ever find the time to not just for himself, but also for his friends provide. Some in his time, they knew him as the maker of tents. It was a skill that he used to pay his rent. But for posterity and beyond, he's a gospel light bearer whose writings we read, so to God we'll draw nearer. And so this realization somewhat gave me a clue as to how to approach that which I am to do. And then, of course, I looked to Jesus, through whom the gospel fully frees us. And I remember that he was a carpenter who sawed wooden slats to be used by him afterwards. But his mission on earth subsumed his 9 to 5, for we know that God suffered, he bled, and he died. And from the tomb, yes, he rose and is now quite alive, so that both you and I can live in his grace in this place till we soon see his face. So in the end, the young man saw that in his round-the-world search for his identity, he had just been looking in the wrong places. He looked to his vocation to fulfill his mission. But when finally he decided to move forward in faith, possibilities opened to him that he never envisioned.